Vishy, thanks for being with us, and of course to all of you for taking the time to come here. And he's the land of this soil, so you guys have more right on him than I have. But all of us, without exception, are delighted with Vishy's performance. And I thought that instead of the usual long chats, I'm going to take the first right of asking him questions before you people do, because I've hardly met him. I did talk to him this morning when he was boarding the flight from Delhi, so just to make sure that he'd had a little bit of sleep, which he hasn't had. He just changed his flight in Delhi early morning. But before I ask him a few questions, I thought it'd be useful to set a context. Vishy became world champ for the first time in the year 2000. All of us know that. And I consider that a very good omen, because it's the beginning of a new century. And I believe that this century will be known, or will get known as the century of the mind. We've left 3 centuries of the machine behind us. The industrial era got over. Not got over, but it's kind of is subsumed within society. And the end of the last century, we started getting the post-industrial world, or the knowledge era, or the information era. And therefore, to me, this century is the century of the mind. And so we consider it a very good omen that in the century of the mind, one of the finest minds in the world anywhere got recognition. And it is just a little before that NIIT, my colleagues, we had the privilege to interact closely with Vishy, and for Vishy and NIIT to start partnering on a very important objective, which was important for us and also turning out to be very, very important for Vishy, which is that we are engaged in the matters of the mind, if I use that word. NIIT is engaged in the matters of developing fine minds, and Vishy is perhaps the best role model for young minds. And so soon after, in fact, during the recognition event, his recognition event in 2000, in an informal discussion that night, this idea got born of connecting chess with development of the mind. And therefore the idea of looking at how do we take chess to young children in India got born. And then within a couple of years, we put together the MindChampion Academy, and we coined this term MindChampion for Vishy, which we feel very good about at a moment like this. And in a sense, in this last little over a decade, our preoccupation together has been around challenging young Indian minds, looking at chess as a possible vehicle to get them to improve their mental capacity. And well over 1 million children in this country have started chess for the first time under this initiative that Vishy is leading. In many ways, when we look at people talk of the IT phenomena and India taking a leadership, is also an expression of the power of the Indian mind. In the post-industrial world, information, informatics, this all stuff of the mind, I think India is showing its capability on a larger canvas in the IT industry and showing leadership there as well. So I look at this century as the century of the mind. I look at Vishy's grand victory, arrival on the scene, 2000, as a great thing, as a great symbolic action. We see the rise of the IT industry as another symbolic action. And in that sense, we can say that the India's century is the 21st century, the century of the mind. So this is the context within which all of us are very excited with whatever Vishy does in his game, of course, but equally important with his increasing passion to see how do we get the young people in this country not just engaged in chess, but shaping their minds better and shaping it through something that he's so good at, which is the game of chess. So I just wanted to reiterate that commitment on Vishy's part, because I remember talking to him in 2005 or 6, and when he was, then 7, 8, 9, when he was winning again and again. So I said, okay, there'll be many years of victory, but when you look back maybe 40 years later, what would you like to look at? And I think it was very nice to hear him say that, have to build a legacy beyond being a champion so many times. And that legacy would be on what do we do for the young in this country and what do we do for minds in the country. So I'm repeating that because to me that has become a larger and larger, as I see also Vishy's own thinking, a larger and larger issue in front of him. And just one more point before asking the question is that, we had occasion quite clearly, many of us in this room, to watch, to understand Vishy's performance in this period and to understand things about how the game goes. I'm not a great chess player, but now I watch his matches and I try to see from his expression what's going on, and then perhaps how the game is going. Many of you are great experts. But when we look at the symbolism of his victory at this time, there's another very, very interesting relevance. So we look at India at this time, we look at India, the world, slowdown of the world, in India's own challenge of the last couple of years, and we see India getting ready for a change. We see India having, encountered 2 years of a difficult time, and we are seeing India getting ready for a big change as we look forward to a change. And so there's an expectation in India for a big change in front of us, for a big period of growth coming back in front of us. And people are talking a lot about, what will be new? What are the new ideas we need as India bounces back, which it inevitably will, and perhaps as we go into the coming year. Perhaps let me start by asking you to reflect on the candidates tournament. The last one you played was almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, a little on your own reflection on the, how was it then, how was it this time?
Well, there have been so many changes since then. I would say the way people approach chess, the way people learn chess and so on has changed completely from those years. The biggest difference is computers, obviously, which is why in candidates tournaments these days you get a more diverse field of countries playing. Though still we had 4 Russians, but I think you get a much more of a diverse field than before. And I think in those days youth's experience tended to be a bit more balanced. Whereas now the nature of chess, I think, is now tilting more towards youth. And it's harder to bring your experience to bear when it's possible to get the benefits of that experience much faster.
Well, you were in the youth at that time, last time you played. But coming to this particular time when you were there, and you'd been through a challenging year, and after that to come through in this candidates completely unbeaten is a remarkable achievement. So what was new in the way? Was there some new thoughts, new ideas? What did you have to do which was new to get this remarkable performance where there's, every game was either a draw or a win?
I think the most important thing was that I had a certain lightness again. And this lightness meant I could experiment a bit more with what I wanted to play and so on. In fact, in terms of technical work, after the match, I felt it was more important for me to recover emotionally rather than to get back to more technical work, because without finding some emotional equilibrium, the technical work just tends to be wasted. you can't execute it unless you're feeling comfortable and happy with yourself. And in a funny way, I got into the whole discussion of whether I was going to play the candidates or not. What I was trying to say was, I need maybe a few days alone just to let your head settle down. I mean, it's a bit of a funny thing. I mean, the World Championship title becomes something that you just think you own. And then one day it's gone, and you have to get used to this kind of withdrawal symptom. So I said that, and then I realized it was a mistake to mention this to the press, because when it's out there and it's being discussed, you don't get the peace of mind you want. And I think that meant that only after Christmas, between Christmas and New Year, I managed to get a week alone and just to think about it. And in fact, by the end, I think one morning I woke up and I think, but it's insane not to play. What possible justification could there be not to play such a good tournament? I mean, I'll play, and whatever the consequence, the result is, that's fine, I'll deal with it. But there's simply no sense in not playing this event. I mean, I'd already spoken to several people. Some basically say, well, this is something you have to figure out on your own. I think you'll just know it when you get there, and so on. And obviously, by now some of you have heard that over dinner, Kramnik basically said, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't play. It's a very lovely town, actually. You should come at least for that. Just play and see how it goes. And that's someone who could relate to what I was thinking. It seemed to make sense, but anyway, that was what, maybe the 12th of December or something, or the 13th. And so I spoke to some friends. Basically, it's a way of coming to terms with everything. It's not like I sat down and wrote a list, arguments for playing, arguments against playing, and sort of weighed them up. That's not how it happens. I think you simply want to, literally like it happened, you want to wake up one morning and decide, do I feel like playing or do I not feel like playing? And I was in a way relieved that I still felt like playing, and that was it. And it's striking that sometimes the new thing you do is simply to be comfortable with facing new problems. I think when you're a bit depressed and you're not enthusiastic about your chess, then you're often afraid of many kinds of unpleasant situations at the chessboard, whereas when you're optimistic, they don't even look so unpleasant. So that, I think, the decision to play and the decision to go there and so on was more about just feeling stable again and feeling enthusiastic about playing chess again. I had not given any thought beyond that. It seemed premature. In a strong event, I mean, we're not just saying this to be diplomatic. During a strong event, when you go, there's no sense in making long plans. Every day you have a tough opponent, which means the game is unpredictable, which means the result is unknown. So why would you plan for 5-6 games when every single game you're putting 3 possible results? So my idea was, let's go there, play game by game, and just see. But it seems that, at least looking back, that I'd managed to become very calm about the event. So, I mean, I'm going to go play because I love chess, and the result will kind of take care of itself. And it seems like the other participants were much more nervous than I was, because during the tournament, they had a lot of ups and downs. In fact, I won the same number of games as 3 other people. But I was the only undefeated person, and that made the difference in the tournament.
So now let's come to perhaps what all of us saw as the most interesting moment, and tell us what was going on in your mind. Now your first game comes up with the guy who's clearly seen as the best player in that 8, Aronian, and you're coming from wherever you're coming, and that's the very first game. So what was going on in your mind before the game, and then what was going on in your mind just after the game?
Well, I had the white pieces against Aronian, and in fact, I have in classical chess, that is the long format, I have never beaten him with the white pieces in my life.
Never?
Never. So the thing was just to play a sensible line where I was still banking on a lot of the preparation I had done for the match, which never got used. So I had that, and the idea was to be calm. But of course, before the game, I was a wreck. The game started at 3. We had to take the car to go to the venue at 2:30, and so you're checking lines at 2 o'clock, making sure that your thoughts are clear on what you're planning to do in each different line. And I think when we got there on the morning of the 8th, and we didn't know what to start working on. Should we start working on the black pieces or the white pieces first, because the first game, but then if you do too much work for the first game, you can't think anything else. So then we decided to, that is Sandeepan Chanda, who was my second during the event, we decided to focus on the black pieces first for some of the future games, and then by the time we got to the 11th, to switch entirely to this game so that we had 3 days for it. And that's what happened. In fact, he uncocked the first new move in this game. And this is a very powerful thing, because the chance to get in your preparation means you're dictating the future course of the game, and your opponent is reacting to whatever you do. So you're choosing the path in which the game goes. In fact, he got to do this. So I made a couple of moves fairly apprehensively, looking out to see if any sort of thing, well, you start looking for deep ideas that your opponent might have. And then suddenly I got a chance to trade down to an endgame where I would have the double bishops, so I would have the slight advantage. And when we got there and I made the move, he realized he had been a bit careless on the previous move. But he decided anyway, no big deal, I can probably hold this endgame. So we went down an endgame where he's slightly worse, but he thinks he should be able to keep it manageable. And suddenly I had 2 pawn breaks. And the position turned out to be much more concrete. By concrete, I mean that instead of I'm planning this and he's planning that more in general terms, I mean that I play this and you have to react like this and I do this. So he found that he was forced to make one more concession and then a third one. And then he got in a very unpleasant position, which normally is a big advantage in itself. Because computers define unpleasant positions quite well because they don't know it's unpleasant. Whereas humans tend to dislike their position so much they lose control. And this is the bit that was unnerving for me in a way, because my position got so good so quickly. I went from slightly better endgame to very close to winning in the space of about 4 or 5 moves. And we were both in a bit reacting to this new situation. Then we went down to the endgame where I missed a couple of clear wins. And I thought, oh boy, I'm doing this again. But luckily at the end of that I saw one long sequence right after the time control. So we hit move 40. And I think he was down to seconds for the last 2 moves. So I was sure I'd catch him there, but he somehow slipped through. And then on move 40 I could think and see that if I follow one specific path, then it's a forced win. I mean, otherwise I'm better, but nothing forcing is happening. So I made the 3 forcing moves that I needed to do, and of course he resigned. And that was very nice. So my first win ever with him with white. And also you beat the, the biggest favorite by a wide margin in the first round. That's simply a dream start.
At that moment when you knew the game was done and you had won, describe your emotions at that moment.
I think at that moment, the biggest sense was...
Who were you thinking of besides the chess pieces? And what was going on in your mind?
I was mainly telling myself that I should calm down. Because when you're so excited, you'll tend to rush it a bit, and then the game can still slip out. So I told myself, no, double check everything. Every single move we're going to double check. And this one we're not going to spoil, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And then it was all over so quickly. And after that, it's just relief. But by the time I finished the press conference and we go back to the hotel, I had to remember that there were still 13 games left. So after a game like this against someone who's such a difficult opponent for you, you have a tendency to think you've done your job, you can almost go back to the airport, but there is still a lot of other work to be done. So then I mean, it's a nice start to put in the bank, but you still have to work, something like that. And it was very, very positive, because for most of the tournament, Aronian was my closest rival. And this game was haunting him, because our individual result would have been the tie-break. I got a half-point bonus over whatever is my lead at that point. So if I was half-point ahead of him, he had to catch up by a full point in order to overtake me. And that was always the problem for him. So when I took a 1-point lead after the 9th game, he was in effect 1.5 points behind, and so on.
Then let's go to your 13th game, which was another fantastic game, which I think drew out more energy from you than many games ever. 91 moves.
Yeah.
So how much of that was tenacity and resilience, and how much of that was new ideas?
I would say actually the whole game was new. We had a very funny situation. We had a rest day before that game. And his second during the tournament, his trainer, was my former trainer, the Uzbek Kazimjanov. So I knew that whatever he did, he would have a lot of insight into what I was doing. And once this is in the background, then both sides are influenced by this thought. So he made the decision that he was going to go out of theory as quickly as possible. So in fact, he chose a sideline on move 4. I mean, it's not non-existent or something, but essentially a very quiet line, which he wanted to play a new game without opening preparation on starting move 4. And of course, I had to join in. So that game was almost entirely new, but new in the sense that we are figuring out at the board, as opposed to starting work on it.
Nice.
We are trying to do everything at the board. But something impressed me a lot in his body language, because Karyakin is generally a fairly easygoing person who, quick to laugh, generally very relaxed. Not someone I feel a lot of aggression from. But already on the rest day, we saw each other somewhere, and you could see his face was very grim. Almost like he was telling himself he was fighting for his big chance. The thing is, he would have needed to beat me at that point, because he was 1.5 points behind me. But in order to catch me, he would have had to beat me. And then as a result of the tie-break thing, he would only need to make another half point, and now he would win on tie-breaks. So, in effect, if he didn't beat me, nothing he did mattered. But if he beat me, I would now be in the position of a desperado.
Okay.
And so with him, I suddenly noticed that his body language, his demeanor, everything had changed. So I understood this was going to be a long, tough game. And invariably, when you have these kinds of thoughts, it spills over into the chessboard. So I started making 2 or 3 inaccuracies, and pretty soon I was in trouble, but long-term trouble, which means that I would have to sit and defend a long game. So my reaction was just to sort of mentally get ready for a long game. I mean,
so more resilience than new ideas.
Well, at that stage, I mean, the game has been completely new already.
So everything is new.
Everything is new.
But resilience was the big thing.
Well, you tell yourself that it's not going to be it's not going to be short.
It's not going to be short. Okay.
So you mentally try to get ready for a long game. You see, it's a big difference when if you think the game is going to be over rather quickly, and then you find out it's going to go on very long. It can be very unpleasant.
Okay.
And you can react badly. Whereas what I was trying to tell myself was, there's no way this is going to finish early. So just sit here. It's going to take 8 or 9 o'clock all the way. And so it was. And still the mistakes were, well, I wouldn't call them mistakes, because they were not objectively mistakes, but the risky decisions continued. I had to decide whether I was going to sit still or do something committal. With some hesitation, because once you committed that thing, there's no taking it back. I decided that sitting still was more unpleasant, So I decided to charge forward. I charged forward, and then the same thought hit both of us, that a certain endgame that he could head for was lost, because after that it's very straightforward. His knight takes a pawn, I exchange my rook for his knight and bishop, and the king and pawn ending is won. And the both of us had the same thought, and then suddenly he for the first time he started to get excited. I mean, the whole time he was sitting there very grim and determined.
How did you get to know he had the same thought? Does it become very
obvious? You can see it
in
his face. You can see it in his face.
Okay.
And for the first time his eyes lit up. I mean, something told me that he had seen the same thing. And then he thought for 20 minutes, executed the move, got up and left very confidently. And I thought, I've blown it. Because I walked into something from which there's no way back and there's no way forward. And now I thought for 20 minutes. And try as I might, I could not find his winning idea. And then it hit me that, in fact, he had probably missed something. So if you want to take the sequence back, it means that by dangling this possibility in front of him, I caused him to make a mistake.
Okay.
And which he fell for. He took the bait. And then his winning chances had evaporated. But just to show you his frame of mind, we still sat for about 36 moves till the end. In fact, the arbiter, at the end I started to push one pawn, the hedge pawn. I pushed it all the way because I knew I could trap his knight and then use the rook to make sure that he couldn't make any progress. But the arbiter told me afterwards he was shocked, because he said you had only 14 moves left for the 50 move rule, which is when you don't move a pawn for 50 moves, then it's a draw. So he was surprised that exactly at that moment I started to push the pawn, because then it means 36 moves get wiped out and the count of 50 starts again. But in fact my method was shorter. I was simply tying up his knight and the thing. So again a game where I think psychology played a very important role. I think my difficulty started from the fact that seeing him and his attitude to the game, I started to make a few mistakes. And then later on, maybe he suddenly saw the prospect that the game could finish and he relaxed. And then the opposite happened. The game in fact moved definitely to a draw. I mean, I was never lost in this game, but it looked like I was on the verge for many, many moves. And I mean, one of the best results in my life was Mexico City in 2007, which was the World Championship then. Same format and everything, but that time it was the World Championship. And two things happened in that tournament which were mirrored here. My lead increased to a 1 point in game 9, and I had the toughest game, the one I had to defend till the very end, on game 13. So then it was Aronian in game 9 and Grishchuk in game 13. This time it was Topolov in game 9 and Karyakin in game 13. But essentially I could look back on that parallel.
So clearly these two games were important and perhaps tough and difficult, but was there any game which you would consider, when you look back at it, enjoyable?
I enjoyed all three, but I would say game 9 was the most crucial for the tournament as well.
So one more thing which I'm sure all of you who track Vishy's activities you would know, but I had missed it, is that when he was in Zurich a couple of months ago, he received another recognition which every year FIDE gives to the player, to the most, should we say, novel idea in a game, in a move. So for 2013, Vishy got that recognition, which is interesting because we missed it, in a sense, in all the news that was going on. So when this recognition came to you at the Zurich Games, were you already aware that this was indeed the greatest idea which had happened last year among new ideas, or was it also a nice surprise for you?
It was a surprise because it's not journalists voting like in the chess Oscars, and it's not but it's still, I think, a combination of an editorial board and some opinions on what the best move is. I mean, I already knew that this game had been a classic, but this was in January 2013, my black win against Levon Aronian. At that point, Some people called it the game of the century, which I thought was a big compliment given that there were still 87 years to go. And I mean, it's a very, very good game. No question. It's very easily a candidate for one of the best games I've played in my life. Whether it was one of the most important games, I wouldn't say, but definitely one of the best. And I think here it's important to highlight what exactly is being rewarded. You see, in chess, there are generally held opinions on every position, just like in science. People think a certain position is good for black, or good for white, or this is the verdict, or this is the plan, or this is what happens from now on. And knowing all these is like your guidebook as you try to find your way around a chessboard. These are the sort of markers that you refer to. But every once in a while, people will suddenly have a completely new viewpoint on a position. They'll find a move that no one has thought of and show, in fact, that all the previously held opinion on this position is outdated. And so that's why in chess, the ability to take a completely new look at something, just like in science, is highly appreciated. But it's also part of the renewal. It's only if you had the courage to question current existing knowledge that you can come up with something new. And the second thing is, of course, being able to use new tools to find all this. Obviously, I'm referring to computers in some sense. But this is how a chess player renews himself or herself. You constantly have to find new twists, new things, because the old stuff everyone knows. It's common knowledge. What's going to separate you from other people is the ability to bring a new twist to the game. And I think this is how the game moves along, but I think this is also how chess players develop. The day you stop developing new thoughts and being able to challenge conventional wisdom, I think you'll immediately see it in your results. But of course, but there are also incremental improvements and there are blockbusters. And I have made many incremental improvements in my life, but this is one of the blockbuster ones. This one against Aronian. So it was nice to have that rewarded. But in general, it's a very, very important skill in chess to be able to do new things, to do things in the old things in new ways, and to be able to look at something and have the courage to take a new look at it. Because once you assume that something is there and I know it already, then you're closing that part of chess.
So this is fantastic. I mean, this new thing now actually becomes more visible as a theme. I mean, you're the only great player who's won in all formats, which again means you're renewing continuously, right?
Because the approach has to change for each one.
So much more of change. So that, I guess, is now established part of your DNA. Now, before I open it to colleagues to ask questions, just one last question. So how many days of rest before you start getting ready for the big one? Or have you already started?
Well, some thoughts are inevitable. I mean, I'll have to start planning things a little bit, and but I've already, as you can imagine, I've already had some thoughts on how to do better and what I needed to work on and things like that. So some of it is, I mean, I have some ideas how to proceed from here. I will wait, of course, for the dates and the venue and the bid that finally wins. So that it's scheduled for the end of the month. So till the end of the month, I won't know really where it's going to be, where the match is going to be, and what the final dates are going to be. But so I have a perfect excuse not to work very hard now. I think it's nice to take a well-earned rest. Also catch up at home, with my son and everything. His holidays also start now, so everything sort of ties in nicely together. And I can't see myself, when he's free the whole day in the house, I can't see myself sitting in the computer and doing work now. So I'm fairly confident that I won't get a lot done in April.